Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rocket Lasso Live. This is Season 2, Episode 25. We've done 25 episodes already. I'm not sure how late the season will go. Usually, the driving force of cutting off the season, well, it's good to break up the season because otherwise it just goes on forever and there's not like a break in it. But the usual thing is Half-Res coming up, but unfortunately Half-Res got canceled this year, just like pretty much every event. So that is not necessarily the thing to cut it off, but it would still be good to have a couple of months of being able to focus on other things. So who knows when it'll go, but we still got a couple episodes in us for sure. We'll make it to at least 30, that's for sure. We've got questions coming in all over the place on Twitch and on YouTube. So let's dive right on in. I'll share cinema. And I'll start with Twitch this time. I think there's some typed out. No, that's not. There are some typed out questions. Let me take a look. Oliver, that's a little specific for this type of thing. I don't. Well, yeah, I don't specifically know about ambient occlusion settings in specific. We'd have to just tinker to see. A cresting wave without simulations. That seems like it could take a lot. Yeah, somebody's linking to a wave deformer that somebody made as a plugin. I am familiar with it. I've never used it. And let's see. Ooh, I like the idea of this. Meeks has got art directable way of controlling splines detaching from a shape. That sounds weird and interesting. Let's check it out. So what do we got here? It is Imaginary Forces or the C main title, or maybe it's SEE, I'm not sure. And audio's down. Let's check out what we've got. Did you call it a time? A minute and 9 in. An Apple original. Yeah, I'm not sure what this is. C? What is C? I'm not familiar with this as a source material, but it's a lot of interesting little noodling around lines. But let's take a look at the specific one, which is right around now. Ooh, look at that. That's cool. Oh, man. That could be a little tricky. I'm trying to think if I have anything that immediately jumps to mind. That's cool. I like how minimal that is. Really neat. So yeah, from Imaginary Forces, pretty cool looking thing. Splines. I mean, to what degree can you just brute force that? I mean, certain ones are getting detached, and there might be things we can do. I was actually doing a lot of exploration trying to make a full tutorial out of the idea of some splines detaching and flying away. It's not a super easy thing to do, but let's just try some super duper basic things, see what we can make work, and if anything looks even halfway reasonable. So I'm going to go with my favorite ampersand as a single item, and I will go to the official font of Rocket Lasso, which is Futura. Let's go with PT Bold. That's a nice one. And I suppose a little bit of rounding never hurt anyone, so we'll get a little bit of rounding on there. A couple of segments. Yeah, that'll work. And we want to start applying some sort of lines to it. Now, an obvious thing to go for here would be, let's go with our Midnight Blue. An obvious thing to go for would be hair, which might still be that might be a good direction to go with it for creating some very basic lines. Now, I'm just gonna look at the thing. Yeah, they're all very blown off to the right, and they are being art directed and placed very specifically. I'm not going to be super worried about placing them perfectly, but we'll do a little bit of maybe some of the ideas that could be done. I'm adding a hair object to this, and it doesn't seem to want to acknowledge it very well. I'm going to throw it into a connect object, and let's try putting the hair onto that. That liked that better. There is a huge count right now. I'm going to say that this is not specifically based on the vertex. Instead, it can be on the polygon area. And I'm going to want to see these in the viewport very well. So let's limit this to, let's say, 1,000. The length is pretty long. So let's drop it in half to, that seems a little bit better. And I'm going to tell the hairs to calculate as guides. So we have the exact same ones. Under generate, actually, we can go to editor and make sure we're seeing our actual hair lines. So we should see the final lines when we hit play in the viewport. And we're for now we can see the hairs, but eventually we'll probably be generating splines that we can do something with. But let's just see what kind of forces we can get from this kind of out of the box. Now, first of all, we got gravity, so let's turn off our gravity. So actually, I went to dynamic settings, but actually we just go to forces and let's zero out the gravity, so it'll just float around, do whatever it wants, and then create a wind for ourselves. I'm not sure what kind of forces we'll put in here, so let's play around with a field force. The field force should, I think, automatically apply. Create a solid to give it a direction that's going to blow upward. I don't want to go upward. I want to go X plus. So we'll put a 1 in X plus. Set this to 40, and that's the equivalent of gravity off to the right. So now you can see that they're blowing in that direction. I want those hairs to be a little easier to see. So change the thickness up to, let's say, 2. That's fine for now. Color, we can just have them stand out for our purposes while working on it. So I'll make it a nice, pretty bright color in there. All right, excellent. I don't need to see the field force for now. Now, immediately something you're going to see is that these hairs, they have as many segments as we told the guides to have, which is 8. So you can see actually the resolution of these lines, which you can think of just as splines. And as I crank this up, those are going to get smoother and smoother and smoother. We can really push it to 24, and now there's twice as many. It will take twice as long to calculate, and everything's going to bend over and be able to flop over more. So those are things to keep in mind. But if I lower it back down again, you see we get this very harsh turning on the corner. That is actually something we can control. I think it's under dynamics. If we go to properties, there is root hold, I think. I'm not sure if that's the one we want, but let's drop root hold down to 0. Yeah, and now root hold at 0 means it's not trying to straighten out the base of it, which actually, that allows us to let this blow over on the side. Now we are still creating quite a few hairs. I'm about to try and make this a dynamic object for us to be bouncing off. So this might be a little heavy, especially for our live stream. So I'm going to drop our count down again. It's not very randomly distributed, so I don't know for sure. But if I click regrow, if I click regrow, it's going to be a little more random. We're just trying to get a little more direct control over this thing. All right. Our poly count here is not super high, but it's also not super low. I might lower it just for, once again, live streaming purposes. There's a lot fewer polygons now. We don't need quite as many subdivisions for testing anyway. There we go. And I suppose regrowing again now, since I changed the base geometry, would be a good idea. Now, right-clicking on the connect, very easy to add a hair collider, and that should be doing a fine job of not letting these pass through. And we could potentially push that even further, but it's working quite nicely as it is. So I will continue from there. So it's actually working pretty well. Let me think. If we do something like that, something that might be nice is clicking inside the hair, and where do we do it? Is there there's a relax. Is there a store? Is that what we want? No. How do we set the initial state? Clear, regrow. I thought there was a way of setting the initial state, but to tell you the truth, I'm not sure I've ever done it. Cache. I'm going to take a look at it's under the tools. Oh yeah, I think that is a thing. Set initial state. It's so weird that it's buried in the menu. I remember I got confused by that last time. So we hit play, and instead of that being anywhere in the actual hair tool, we have to click this button. I just click set initial state. And now that should be the starting point of this, which, I think in our case here, that should work pretty well for us. And let's introduce some additional movement. So create a random field, and this is going to be controlled via a noise, which is perfect. I don't want to see it a little more clearly, so I'm going to turn off the direction. We can just see the scale of this wind. We can see sort of the scale emerge overall, which is not too bad. Set it up to maybe 300. You can see a little bit more of a wiggle. And this should be completely randomizing the direction everywhere. It's going to be consistent, so giving it some animation speed will make that change over time, make it a little more chaotic, but it's a pretty good scale. And if you know me, I actually usually like creating 2 of these. So I'm going to duplicate this random field, and we'll call this one, well, let's make a large and a small. Make sure that they are both being applied additively. And we'll make the large one larger. I'll jump it up to, I don't know, 800. Change the random seed. And we'll take the small one and drop it down a little smaller, like 200. We don't have to make it as strong, but now there should be the overall idea of the small one can be having individual effect, and the large one will make them feel a little bit more uniform. So we can pull the power back on that if we're inclined to. And now you can see a little bit of that uniformity. Actually, if you want the uniformity, there's no reason to be subtle. I'm going to crank that way up. Let's see. Yeah, we can feel way more of the uniformity between that wind. And then if we take a look at, well, I thought I had turned it off, but now this is just a small individual-esque one doing its thing pretty subtly. And then here's the large one, which right now is more powerful, blowing all over the place. So you combine those two and hopefully you can get, you know, kind of a nice combination of the two. Now we can add that on top of our solid. So now they're always blowing in that direction, but now we can get these big gusts of wind blowing them around whichever direction we want to, which is always a nice little addition. Very nice control over that. Excellent. So that's not bad to start out with that. Now, of course, our challenge is going to, well, a couple additional things I want to throw in here. Let's save the scene file. And as I always mention, if you're supporting on Patreon, you can get access to the scene files if you're a person who likes to reverse engineer things like I do. I don't know. Hair drift. I have a couple thoughts. One would be, what if we want clumps? Like, I want more hairs. And then it goes to, what if we want to start clumping the hairs up in particular areas? Like, this is just a lot of hairs. I'm actually kind of surprised. If we crank them up, they seem to have automatically interpolated between what was already there. So we don't have to reset the initial state, which I thought we would. So that's nice. But we have our growth setting in here. This one I've always had a little bit of a not great intuition for, because we can feed in, there's a density here, and we can feed in a noise, but I've never gotten it to work super consistently. First of all, I don't think we'll see it. Like, let's crank up the power here, and the scale is relatively large, so we should be able to see the effect pretty blatantly, but like, I don't feel like I'm seeing the effect there. So let's crank up our hairs again. It's not letting us go beyond a certain point, so I'm gonna try and regrow. I'm in guides. Why? Oh, we're back on polygon center. Interesting. I'm gonna change these to polygon area, make a lot of them, regrow, and oh, that's weird. That's polygon area, but it's, oh wait, maybe it's working. So like, why are we getting these patches? It's like, oh wait, we put a noise in here that's supposed to give us patches. So if I were to shrink this and regrow, yeah, okay, that does work. So this is a way of us creating hairs only in particular areas. And I wanted to crank the count up so we could very clearly see where they were being generated. So now you can see we've got some in some areas and some in other areas. And it seems to be working fairly well. I don't know if they're showing up where it's white or where it's black. So let's try making even less white areas and see if there are fewer hairs when they regrow. Yep. So we can limit them more along these lines. So that's actually working quite nicely. Drop this down to about 1,000, regrow. And now we should get more of these little clumps going, which I think might look a little bit more like what we saw. It's not entirely, but a little bit more like that. And then I wonder if we can, I don't know if we can, but I'm going to try throwing this into a fusion. I want to see if I can combine two different noises, because right now the top one should completely take over. And my thought is making this really small, dropping that down really tiny. So this should allow for little hairs to sprinkle throughout the entire thing. And if we were to screen that or add, then we'll get the combination of the two. Click regrow. And yeah, a couple are sprinkled around now, some extra little clusters, but definitely some bigger clusters. So we can get that to go. We should be able to get a little bit more separation and whatnot. So it looks all right. Inside of our hair, we can create different scales. So I can go under scale. There's length and scale. Nobody's ever proved to me that there's a difference between them, so I still don't believe that there is. I'm just going to put a big variation of 99% in there. You're not going to see it in the guides, but we can see it in the actual final hairs where these can become a lot longer or shorter. Now, they're never going to get that short given this. Can we push the scale beyond the variation beyond 100. No, you're stuck at 100. So that's unfortunate. And then I also have never really, I'm going to put variation down to 0. I've never really trusted. Yeah, I mean, it seems to be showing it all right. I put this hair, I just put a noise in here, and it does seem to be randomizing the lengths a little bit, which is good. I would like something a little more random, maybe something like a Paxo, and crank up its scale and maybe start increasing the black color a little bit. And I just want more contrast, so I'm pulling those in. And there we go. As I pull this, I want essentially some of those to be at the maximum length. And this is a lot more what I wanted. So it's actually working surprisingly well. So now we get these different clusters of them, and they can get these different random lengths as well. So that's all working quite nicely. Now, I don't know how much this will slow us down. I'm going to just save that over the same one because we haven't really broken anything. How well will this work if I throw into the field force our hair? Actually, if I throw into that our letter, this geometry, I'm going to grab the connect and drag that in, which right now, let's turn everything else off to see it. And if I tell this to calculate based off of the surface, which is a little bit slow to calculate, but we'll see what that does. What this should do is you can immediately see how much slower it is slow to calculate. So I might want to limit that, but you can immediately see that this is pushing everything away from the surface. So it's going to be kind of like that thing where it's trying to straighten out the individual hairs, but there's just this force that's pushing away from the main system. I just want to see what that gives us in general. I think it's too slow for us to keep on regularly, but I want to see if we can get a little bit more of a curve throughout the entire thing. So thank you, Brady. So actually it's working really well. You can see that these are all really curving out from the surface. And I put a relatively large radius. So I'm going to drop this down. And I just want to see what the curve is. We'll probably keep it off for most of the time. I just want to see if we can get, I want a little bit of power. It seems at 55, it's not enough power to push it too much distinctly, and it should probably be added on top of everything else. But yeah, there's a little bit of like keep it away from the surface. But what I would really like to do is a relatively small radius. What's our size here? So you got to keep in mind our scale. If I say a radius of 50, it's still that distance away. So a radius of 50 is still quite large. So just keeping that in mind, I might want to drop this down to something like 20 and then make this be very powerful. So under direction, I'm going to increase the scale to be 10 times stronger. And now very close to the surface, there's a lot of power saying, no, push outward. So you can see how everything is trying to stay away from the surface. And I just, that's going to feel a little bit more organic. It feels like these are attached, but they can't quite pierce through the surface. So I think this is going to lend to a very nice look overall. I'm going to turn it off while we're working because you see how slow that one is to calculate. But we know we can turn that on at the end or at render time and to get a really nice additional bit on there. Now, all of this has been fine. It's been, I'm going to increase the minimum as well. That would be brightness, maybe? Yeah, if I increase the brightness, I never want any of them to be too short because what's the point of super duper duper short ones? All right, now that's a good setup for us having this overall. Now, of course, the main challenge we were talking about was our ability to have some of them fly away. And that is the part that I don't really have a super great process for. Like I said, I did spend a lot of time in a bonus stream trying to figure out a methodology to do that. And somebody else had actually pointed out a pretty neat method that I had not been familiar with, which is the idea of, where was it? I forget which setting it was. I might figure it out. It's like, it might be the fixed roots. Let's see. Stiffness, rest hold. Oh, I'm completely blanking on it. Or maybe we have to disconnect. We have to unroot them and then do it. Let's see if that is what I need. I'm going to go to guides and say, well, let's reroute. I want to maybe disconnect all of them by unroot guides. So I'm going to click that and everything should be unrooted. And then under forces, under Dynamics, turn off fixed. Oh, which setting was it? No stiffness. No man. Oh, there we go. So which one was that? Was it stiffness? No, it wasn't. I think it's the fixed roots. So you can see now that if fixed roots is on, then everything is connected. But you see that has to be on or off at the beginning. I'm going to lock this so we can see the actual hairs. If it's off at the beginning, everything's unrooted, you'll see all the hairs immediately fly away, which is pretty cool. But it does happen right away. If we fix the roots, then they won't fly. All right, let's rewind again. I think they will. Yeah, if we rewind, then they won't fly away. And you can't keyframe that. It doesn't have any effect. But if you turn them off and rewind, then they'll fly away. But if we turn on the rest hold again, let's put a 99% rest hold, then essentially they're trying to hold onto their original position. It's not great because they float away from that surface a little bit, but you could keyframe down the rest hold. So at a certain point, you could let them go. The problem is that there are no, I guess there are these maps. I wonder if those maps would work where we could keyframe it so that some of them would start letting go at certain points. But I really don't like the rest hold modifiers. Oh, maybe I got this working. If we turn the rest hold up, it's saying everything has to be in this position. And then we can say rest hold down here. And I can say, yeah, these are completely stuck where they are. But as they get near the tip, then they're free to start wiggling around. As we pull this backward, then we're just saying that the first one is stuck where it is. So rest hold actually becomes our main property. That can be up at 100%. Now, these maps, can we feed in a map and weaken it? I don't think that we can, but we'll give it a try. I'm going to save it as a new version. Boom. And our vertex, this is not very well set up for a vertex map to be weighting things. So I'll spend just a moment. I guess actually, you know, it'd be better. It'll just take a moment to reset this up. But why don't we throw this into a volume? That's just going to give us very even, clean distribution. So throw this into a volume, and that shall go into a mesher. If we set our volume to the proper amount, it'll calculate quite nicely. Unlock this, drop this down to what, 3? And in this type of circumstance, I think it's fine to do a little bit of this lowering. Even if this is just what we're generating off of and we see the original object, but I will drop that. Actually, I don't want to go too far down on it because the entire point here is that we want the even vertex count. So maybe I'll just make it a little bit not as dense of a mesh. So having done that, I'll make a copy of the entire hierarchy because I want to make that one editable. The hair will now grow from that as the mesh. So I'll put this in here. It's not letting me regrow, but that's because maybe they're unrooted. Update guides. Yeah, I'm not so sure about what we've got connected there. Let's, how do we get that to, oh, I probably have to change this to, yeah, we got to do a couple steps again. Polygon area, regrow them. Now they're on this surface. And then let's make sure that that is what we're colliding with. So we should kind of be back to where we were. That's working just fine. And then, we have to unroot the guides. And then it's got all the same hair settings. So those should be stuck and hopefully we can have them fade off. But I don't think the vertex map works. Maybe it's not even a vertex map it wants. So I'm going to, I'll start by creating a vertex map, set vertex weight, 100%. And we can prove this to ourselves very quickly if it will work or not work by creating a linear field. Set it to Y plus, T for scale. And if I were to scoot this linear field up, oh, come on. Scoot that linear field up, you can see that the top has all of this weight and the bottom doesn't. So if that actually works, which I don't think it will, but we'll try. I think this is where we ran into the limitation when I was trying to figure all this out. Rest hold is the parameter that we want to animate. If I were to drop a, yes, oh yeah, see that was a problem. It doesn't want vertex maps. It wants hair maps. And that's even a kind of conceptually a weird thing too. And there was no way of translating or animating. That was, yeah, that was a limitation. We couldn't animate those. So under simulate, we have something called like a hair. Is it? I think it's a hair selection tag. Soft selection manager. But yeah, I went through a lot trying to get those to combine and whatnot. And it doesn't want to accept a vertex map. And that's what we could keyframe. And you can't control like the hair selection tags with fields or anything. It just doesn't feed that information in. So we're sort of limited to this, which, I mean, that's the unfortunate part, because now we can keyframe this rest hold to suddenly be off. You can just type in, actually, I'll lock it again so we can see it properly. I can just type in 0 and then those will all fly away, which is kind of cool by itself, but it's not, you can't have them slowly fall away. And at that point, the only thing I can think of that you could start letting them slowly let go would be to make a whole bunch of different hair objects. And that's no good. Nobody wants that. Let's see. Yeah, so that's where we do hit the limitation here. So the idea of letting some of them go at different times ends up being the limitation of using hair here. And, you know, as we're seeing here, it's really unfortunate because we're getting very nice, not stiffness. We are getting very nice holding here overall. Like this is looking, all the way all these hairs look is pretty great. In the field force, I can reactivate our point object, which actually is probably turned off. So let's turn those on again. That doesn't seem to be doing the effect, but I did turn off a lot of things with that, so I might have broken that. Hurt. Yeah, I'm not sure what I did to break that, but I'm not too worried about that. But yeah, so this is where I got stumped on it, and I didn't know how to enable that to go. And then the steps that come after that would be, yeah, there's probably too many. If anybody has anything that they have an idea, hit me up on Slack or put it in the live channel for a conversation about it afterward. But there's no way I can read through everybody's individual ideas about what's going on, because there's 1,000 ways that seem like they'd work, but they don't. And I couldn't go too far on that. Now, having said a lot of those things, I wonder if we could build oh no, I think I did a lot of tests along those lines too. But let's spend a very short amount of time and see if we could apply some of these concepts to not hair per se, but some sort of more individual rig that we build. I guess that'd be more complicated than be worth, but like an obvious go-to that I'm thinking would be, we could make a hair here, create it. Let's give it 10 subdivisions. Actually, I think we're working with 12. No uniform ones. And now I've got a straight helix. And if we were to add the hair spline dynamics from the spline menu, then we can, and we probably have to make it editable to set it, but this is now running off of the same simulation that runs in hair. So we could feed it the field force and this individual little, I guess it does need to be made editable. I will make a copy, make that editable. So I think, is even that not going to go? Oh, I didn't make it editable. There we go. So now we have this one individual hair, essentially, that is now going to behave in the same way that we are making everything else behave. And that works. Here's one of the problems is Cinema does not mind running the simulation on an object that has 1,000 individual hairs, because it's still being treated as a single spline object. But Cinema does not like 1,000 spline objects with 1,000 tags holding their information. So that's where things can get complicated. And then in addition, actually, I wonder if the rest hold trick works here, because we were trying to fix the points, but let's try doing that. Oh, I bet this doesn't have the fall off. Yep, that's the problem. This has rest hold, which is wonderful. We can say rest hold, I think, which is what we were using before. And if I hit play, you see it's going to be stuck there. And I could start lowering it down, let's say 10%, and you can see it wiggling a little bit. Let's try 1%, and it's going to probably try and fly away. And it's like, oh, okay, so that works just the way we had it. but we cannot, there's not, look, we don't have the weight the way we did. We can't remap it with that spline. And if we don't have that spline to remap it, then we can't make it behave like a hair. And that would be very easy to control. And then the other problem we get is we can fix these individual points via fixed, but these are not keyframeable. These are buttons, so you cannot keyframe them. We can do some very, very short tests to see if I could select a single point. All these should be linear, by the way. Say, actually, we'll just change that spline to be linear. So selecting that first point, fix it. So now that is stuck and nothing else is allowed to move. And rest hold is sort of keeping it there. So now wind can completely take over, and this should be behaving exactly like the hair. You can even see that it's colliding with this shape just like the hair was, because this is the same dynamic system. The problem is if there's no setting here that we can change that will make it look like it suddenly lets go. Also, well, they don't interact with each other either, but yeah, we cannot release them this way. I don't think there's any espresso. Yeah, Tobias, that could be the case where the strands break up and they don't let go at the root. That starts going into a completely different world, and in the most amazing system in cinema, which is the dynamic system and all the connectors, which is one of my favorite playgrounds to play in. We could make intelligent strands that could get braking forces. Essentially, it would be using a lot of the information I talked about in the chain link tutorial that I released recently. It starts going to fairly complicated things that we can spend a tiny little bit of time on it, but I'm not going to build the system to make it apply everywhere. So let's see what happens. Oh boy, I'm going to make this invisible, but it shall be a collider body, a static mesh collider body. Yes. And then we want to make a chain of dynamic shapes, which we've been doing quite a few times lately. And we have learned some tools to speed ourselves up. And I am planning some proper tutorials on this, but I have reason to wait because I have reason to wait. I'll just leave it at that. And to talk about that, so we'll do a basic version here, which is sort of a preview to a tutorial concept that I do have for it. So creating this, and this will be repeating some things that I talked about in the chain tutorial. This is now 5 units tall, so I'm going to make this go -5. So it's like ping, 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 ping. Now, the size that I make these is going to be the thickness of the hair and the resolution of the hair. So you see, this is a pretty fat hair right now. If I wanted it to be thinner, we could make it thinner on X and Z and still make it taller on Y like that. That does work. We can push that to whatever extent we want. So I guess we'll do that. We'll do 1/5. Then, oh man, we shouldn't be doing this because it's going to eat up a lot of time. But if people are enjoying this, then we can keep on going. I would make we'll do the simple version with just connectors. A more advanced version would also be using springs. I'm not going to use the springs for now. That becomes a child of that. I'm going to allow this to be, there's a lot of little interesting things. What would be the system we let go? I guess we could just let them randomly go. So I'm going to set these to be ball and socket. So they're really big right now. Set that down to 1, maybe 2. I just want to barely see it. So you see that we have that. I need to move it down -2.5. So it's actually pivoting from the correct spot. And this now it's a clone of as many of these as we want to make. So I'll make 10 of them as we had been mostly doing. And you could make them any length that you want. In fact, let's make it further. Why not? I'll set it up to 20. And we have this one connector, and it should be interconnecting a bunch of them. So this is where I would make a duplicate of the hierarchy, make it editable. And we need this connector to connect from its parent to its, to its parent's next neighbor again and again and again to make this be a proper chain. And we can do that manually, but let's spend the moment and make the proper chain of them, which is what am I thinking? We need some espresso. So I'm going to say programming tags espresso. And this will pop up for us. And we need to, oh man, we have to make the whole system. And this is directly from the dynamic chain tutorial, but this is just one of those really cool things that if you learn to do the system, it's actually really powerful. So I'm going to make a connector and a connector. What information do I want to control in the connector? I want to control object A and object B. Where are those coming from? Well, we know that this connector has a parent. I want to get that information. Thus, I will say I want to output the object and get a reference to it. So I'm going to say reference. So here's a reference node, very simple node. We can feed this in as the instance it's looking at and say what it should link to object A is by traveling up one layer. So that will go from this connector up, and then we'll make a second reference, and this one will be feeding into B, and that one wants to go up to 0 next, which is the next object in the hierarchy, not as a child, but the next object, its next sibling, effectively. So just by doing that, with this all connected in that, if I click on this connector, you can now see it is linked to itself and then the next object automatically. Very nice. So we want to be able to have this automatically adopt those settings on every object. In order to do that, we need this all to intelligently travel with the espresso tag, which means I need to drag the espresso tag in, output it as an object, search for the hierarchy node, feed this in as the basis of a hierarchy. And if we delete the path on here, this will just be outputting itself. So I know it's kind of a complex looking thing, but you can even ignore the complexity and just be like, all right, create a hierarchy node, delete, delete. And now this is now outputting. All we need to know is this is now outputting whatever object the espresso tag is on. And that now becomes the reference for this object. It becomes that object, and it now becomes this object. So that's all we had to do. A couple extra nodes, and that now made it so it's not, we didn't have to manually drag the connectors in. Now we can just copy, anywhere we copy this espresso tag, you'll see that those will update to be the proper links, which is pretty cool. And now we can even save ourselves some time by putting this on the cloner. And I can say copy tag to children, and now it's done it. It's done all the math automatically. Right click, select identical tag, delete all but the original one, and now everything is gone and done that update and linked everything along the chain properly. A little bit, I mean, it's a simple concept. It might be complex in the actual execution of it, but I think it's a really powerful just setup. Now, this final connector is actually connecting to nothing. So that's going to stick it to this position. And I don't want that. I'll turn that one off. I also want the original one to have an extra connector that's connecting from 0 to nothing. So this one is actually going to be stuck in that position. I should probably type in 2.5. All right. So with all of that done, we can make them dynamic by saying simulation rigid body. It's already applying this tag automatically to all of the children. We can have this shape calculate as we have automatic. And I can say we have a static mesh. Well, no, not. We can set this to a box. It'll calculate really fast if we set it to ellipsoid. So it's a little less accurate because they might slip past each other, but I think in this case it's probably fine. So now we have a connector saying this one is stuck there, but everything else is just linked to the previous one. Let's save this because we're going way off the rails here, everybody. I'm even going to save it as 2A because it's hair drift dynamics. Actually, it's going to be full on connectors. So hopefully, if I hit play, then we now see that these are all interconnected, jumping to the next spot and blowing all around. It's a little bit crazy in the way that they're wiggling, and we need to figure out why. It might just be that there's a lot of forces going on, and we need more steps per frame. That's actually what I'm thinking it is, because as far as I can tell, this seems correct. We are going from 0 to 1, and that's what we wanted, and that's going from that to that. So yeah, that makes sense to me. Control D, there might just be a lot of forces going, thus going into dynamics, expert, going steps per frame and cranking up to 15. There we go. Just going up to 15, that went a long way. Still a little jittery. So jumping to 25, well, I'm actually, maybe the forces are really strong. I am curious to what degree this stuff is freaking it out, because that's a little, it's a little more jittery. That should not be that jittery. These are usually really, really stable. So did I do something wrong? I don't feel like I did. They're really small. I guess our dynamic scene might be a little large. We can try dropping down. That does seem better. Like I went to expert under dynamics and I dropped our scene scale down because we did make these very small. Usually I'm working more in the scale of like 50 by 50 or 20 by 20. And we made these so small that it didn't like how small they were. Perhaps 10 seems better. It does seem a little extra jittery. But it also could just be the forces that we're applying here. Like the small force could, I don't know. I'm not sure if I believe myself when I say that. Let's just, this is just that wind blowing to the right. And actually that seems a lot more stable. So maybe those are very powerful and adding a lot of shake for considering how small this is. Anyway, I'll leave the large one on. I think that we might introduce some of the shake, but we also don't need this to be quite as powerful. Oh, wow. That does introduce a lot of jitter. Yeah, I'll think on that, but I'm not sure what's causing it. Yeah, interesting. I figured that would work a little bit more straightforwardly, but it is introducing a lot of shake. Let's ignore that for now because there's still a couple different pieces of this puzzle. I'm going to select everything in the hierarchy and say minus 2.5. So everything is scooting. So that's living exactly where the 0 point is. And let's just pretend that we have a single strand here. So this becomes one strand. In theory, if we got this working correctly, we could connect all these with a cloner. We could make a cloner of these and get a bunch of different chains going. So let's just kind of pretend that we got that. And this is now connected. I'm going to ignore the jitter for now. It is bothering me a bit. I'm pretty sure there's something we could do to fix that. I'm just not sure what it would be. Maybe our overall scene is just, maybe it would have been better to scale everything up a little bit, but yeah, man, that's going to bug me all the way through. Is there anything I can do to fix this quickly and easily? I mean, one thought would just be to scale everything up until those are a little bit more reasonable. So we can, turn on X, scale up until we're, I mean, honestly, we could double it, but I kind of want to go to 1,000. That's, I don't know. I don't like it because now those are 10 wide. And if we can go back to our default dynamic size, I also wonder if our collision margin has anything to do with it. Put our scale back to 100 and it could have been collision margin as well, but already that looks smoother. But let's put those winds back in. Of course, they're a lot smaller now, but it's a lot more stable. So go figure. But now we can continue working on that concept. Everything else is the same. So we allow these to just kind of blow around in the wind. And what you could do now as the person controlling it would be to just turn this off at some point. So you get this wind blowing around and you want to break at different random points. So just to be goofy, well, I'm just going to select this random connector and I'm just letting this blow around in the wind. I can just turn it off. And the instant I turn it off, it's going to break at that point, which is pretty neat. We now have complete control over this as an entire system of connections. So being able to just turn off any one of these enables you to make a break and then another break. In fact, if we, I could break this, break just the last couple and those can fall off there and then chop off a couple more and then chop off a couple more. You can see the power that we start getting with the ability to turn these off. So that's one thing. Now, the problem with this is that they are not all, how do we connect them? How do we link them together? Now, an obvious thing to do would be to use a tracer object and link it from, the first one, the second one, the third one, which is great, but that won't work if we break it, if we break the connection, it will still be linking 13 to 14. The tracer will be. And I gotta tell you, actually, right now, I am not thinking of an easy way of doing that. How would, I don't know how I would put a break in a particular spot. There is nothing coming to mind that allows for that. I mean, you've just got your overall line here. We could put the entire thing in a volume. I don't think that would make it look like a particularly nice looking line. You could put, I mean, a thing that would probably work well would be putting in a series of tracer objects. If you know that 13 is going to break, then you could make it break you could do a tracer that's linking everything from 0 to 12 and then from 13 up to 20. And then you'd have a actual break there. And those could fall apart from where they are. Yeah, Paul, that's what Paul was just saying. But yeah, that was my thought, that you could do that. But the reason I don't like that is, what I would want to do is make this become controllable via probably an espresso setup, where we could do calculations on how far like this got blown in the wind, or they could just be a certain random time hits and it will randomly be breaking them. And you'd apply this to the entire overall system. And as more time goes by, more breaks are randomly happening. And we wouldn't even know where those breaks are going to happen. We could build that system. It wouldn't even be that complex. The missing part that I am not able to think of right now is the ability to not know which one is going to break, but interlink them via a spline. Yeah, Paul, I don't think it works that way. You can't do two. We couldn't feed separate lists of them via espresso into different tracers. And if something's going to break again and again and again, let's say one line was really long and it breaks in 5 different spots, that means we need 5 different tracers. And actually, there'd be 5 different tracers for a single object. That would be 5 different tracers just for one line. So it's not like you have 5 tracers that every hair can share. So at that point, you're starting to get a lot of complexity between how all of them are getting interlinked. And that, I don't know, that is not that clean. And that's sort of where this terminates for me. Like, I don't know how to create those nice wispy lines. Now we've got a system that we can break, but we do not know how to interlink them. And I am definitely stumped with that for now. I'd really love if if I had a thought that would allow it. But I just do not. I would really like a way to connect all those, but it does not work. Basil, I don't think that there would be any way to tear a hair, because the only system that does tearing, of course, is cloth. And cloth, I mean, the only thing that would be a thing there would be to put a hair texture, as if you have a bunch of little tiny hairs, into a cloth, and then it would tear. But even cloth, there's a big problem with cloth. You need a lot of subdivisions. And one of the problems with cloth tearing is the actual one that tears. Let's say we were tearing this letter in half. The polygon that gets torn disappears. So you'd suddenly have a gap appear from here to here where this line just wouldn't exist. So the bigger the polygons are, then the bigger the gap that suddenly appears upon the tearing. And really, it would just have to be hidden. And then you end up having to, like, if we turn the original hairs that we've been generating, turn those into geometry, grab the first polygon, the first points near the surface, and said bind those in the cloth, and then let the cloth blow around with the wind, and then applied a bunch of hair textures to these individual strands, then yes, maybe it could sort of do some tearing, but they wouldn't twist around each other very well, because it wouldn't be, Softbody would do that, but cloth does not do a great job of that. Yeah, it's tricky, pretty tricky. Yeah, Zach, I'm with you. Oh yeah, well, you're telling somebody else, but yeah, if only that hair system allowed us to feed in vertex maps, then this would have been working right away. It wouldn't have been breaking in individual spots. Well, the point being is we have a lot of different systems in cinema that were made at different points, and they don't play with each other. And some systems get things retroactively applied to them, like vertex maps now have fields, but we do not get those fed into other systems. And there's a lot further that we could go with some of this concept, but if we can't get this interlinking part of it going, then I don't really see much reason to continue. Even if we fed this into a volume by itself, but then you'd end up with as many volume objects as you have hair objects, and that's also the path to madness. Yeah, cloth can be controlled with vertex maps, but that still goes back to the same problem I was talking about, which is we don't know where we'd have to render individual hairs on top of flat geometry, and they don't twist and wrap around each other, where a system like this would. I know we've got this very basic chain here, but what's really fun about this type of system is if I copy and paste this a few times and hit play, I think our turbulence is still in there. These should tangle up with each other if we have enough steps per frame. They will wrap around. They'll get tangled. You can immediately see them start getting tangled with each other. So that's an advantage. We want that to happen. And hair just wouldn't, or I'm sorry, cloth just wouldn't give us that kind of thing. These might be tangling in ways that they should. No, it is wrapped around. It's hard to tell, but yeah, they're twirling and wrapping around each other. So that's pretty neat. Unfortunately, I don't. Well, it's kind of dangerous because I knew right away in the topic that it was dangerous because I'd already tried to explore this and ran into some limitations, and I think we just found those limitations again. But everybody seems to like the copy tags to children and then delete. That's really useful, really powerful. I mean, it's really great for materials as well. You can apply a material, and if you need to, you can. Actually, all the time when I'm trying to clean up something, if I have a CAD model, let's just say you get a CAD model and you have all these materials applied everywhere, it's super easy to just grab. In this case, I would grab one of the materials, move it up, select and say select identical or select children of same type. And now I can just delete all the materials in one go, but still have the materials in the manager. A lot of little cool workflow things like that. Yeah, there's more to explore there in the future. We're just not there yet right now. It is a fun topic. I don't regret us exploring it, but I think we're at the point that it'd be good to tackle some other questions. So if anybody has another question, feel free to repost it, and we'll carry on. And I just want to say thanks again to Brady for doing a YouTube donation. Thank you very much. It is appreciated. I'm going to turn this fan on. It's getting a little warm in here. Let's see. And I will think about that more because there's a lot of power and potential in the things we were trying to do. It just isn't quite there yet. But man, it'll be good. It'll be good if we can get it working all the way. Oh man, Mick is asking about some sort of advanced redshift thing, creating a mixed shader on two heat fused spheres. That is not something I am very familiar. I know that they can do shader mixing. It is not something I'm very experienced in, so that is not something I want to tackle here on the live stream. Let's see. Durfu is asking, how would you attract Softbodies to each other so that they squeeze against each other? That's a fine little question. We've kind of tackled it in various ways. And we did tackle, I didn't show this. Oh, it doesn't make for a very good setup, but I do want to show this. Last week we had an amazing question and we didn't think we'd be able to tackle it all. And we did more than you would think you would be able to. It was about sticky dynamics. And I didn't get, we got it to work in a very, very minor way. And it wasn't very, it didn't push very far. So I ended up spending a lot more time and rigging up an espresso version of something And let me see if I have it here. Yeah, here we go. Nope, open up on the correct screen, please. So here's what I end up with. And this is using a series of springs. And when one spring, it's essentially espresso, and it's detecting when one point gets near another point, and it's creating a spring between them until it stretches to a certain point. So here was my second take on sticky dynamics. So whenever these touch, they're actually getting us like, 20 springs are interlinking with them, and then the springs are breaking when they stretch apart. So it was pretty fun. It's not perfect, but it was cute. There might be something more to do with it. And I think it's not that many nodes. It's like 15 espresso nodes, but it's like the most complex 15 nodes I've ever interlinked between them. So it's super crazy. So anyway, the question of squishing, squeezing and squishing soft bodies against each other. We've tackled this in a couple of different contexts, but let's see if we can do anything new, especially with some of the field forces that we now have. Let's do it with some cubes, because why not? 5 by 5 by 5. I don't want it too subdivided. In fact, I might even make this 4 by 4 by 4 and then put a single subdivision fillet on it. Yeah, this is what I'm looking for. So I'm going to do something like this. So the key thing to note is that all of these are very similar in size all over the place. So I can make them very uniform. And that becomes our base shape. Throw this into a cloner. It is set to grid. I will set it to 3 by 3, and they're all perfectly scaled already. I just want a little bit of air between them, so I'll put an extra 2 units between. Now, this is probably already, this might be too many. All right, it is too many, so we'll make it X, Y, Z. I'll just go 2 on Z. So that is a bunch of soft bodies all hanging out doing their own thing. Actually, it's not soft bodies yet until we right-click and say Simulation Soft Body. So now they're all soft bodies. It should be relatively safe to just hit play, but first I'm going to turn off gravity. Control D, general gravity. Let's save it, because maybe it's not safe to hit it. You never know. 3A, soft body hug. All right, let's hit 1 frame forward just to see how long it takes to calculate. 2 frames forward, hit play. All right, that seems fine. They're not doing anything because they're just floating there. So a couple things that you can do to start squishing them together. The first one is maybe a little obvious, but it's tried and true. Let's squish them in a box. I'm going to make this as simple as I possibly can on myself. Put these in a box that's barely containing them. Make it a collider body, which will be a static mesh, so they should be able to be trapped inside. And at the time of 0, record their size. Go forward a little bit of time. Let's go to about 45. Teeth scale, I'm going to scale down the box. Not that far, because I don't know what results we shall get. And now I don't actually need to see the box. So rewind. Oh, now who knows how dangerous this will be. But there should be, I'll save it in case it crashes. But there should be a big invisible box that's scaling its way down and squishing these. Working pretty well so far. And we didn't squish it that far. It is important to note, though, that scaling an object like this, it's going to be very likely that these individual soft body parts are going to want to escape that shape. We're still at the default steps per frame, which is only 5. This is actually doing a fine job of compressing those. Better than I thought it would, honestly. I thought this wouldn't work as well as it is. But they are in there, and they are getting squished. I think we're going to have to crank up our steps per frame for sure. And you can see how long it's taking to calculate per frame. And it's not doing anything particularly exciting right now, I know. So let's simplify again. As much as I like seeing a bunch, we shall simplify. Create that box one more time. Squish them perfectly inside there. Re-record that scale. Delete the second one. So now they're just trapped inside of this box. But I'm thinking, let's use some field forces to actually make them travel around, do their thing. So a field force with the power of gravity. And if we just feed in a spherical field, you can see immediately the spherical field is telling them all to, I think, fly away. I think it pushes them away, so it's a wild guess, but I will say direction invert. I'm also going to say full power all the way, so this actually is full power. So these should be all getting attracted to each other now. Honestly, if we want to visually see that better, it's probably a good idea to shrink all the cubes down just a little bit. Now we can see them react a little bit more. So once again, just a single frame forward. Nope, I got it wrong. So they're pushing away. You see that they're getting pushed away and they hit the box. Honestly, we don't need the box right now. So the one time I try and anticipate it, I do it wrong. So now they're all attracted to each other, hang up play, and they're all going to get squished in. Now they're all just inclined to be floating and attracted to each other and doing their own soft body thing. That's not going to be anything particularly interesting. But if we add in a random field and add that to the system, which should already be Perlin noise, probably a little small, so jump up to 500, give it a little bit of speed, then hopefully we can start getting a little bit of extra motion in here. It's not very strong as compared, so I'll double the strength of the random. I guess this seems a lot bigger than our previous one, so my scale might be way off. 2,000. All right, 2,000 starts getting to the point where there's a little bit. You can now see the uniformity between the randomness. So you can see these start to drift apart and do their own thing a little bit. Now, all of this is going to be very dependent on the actual power that we're feeding it. So these are all getting squished together, but their initial state was not such that we're really seeing the effect too much. I think I'll spread them out more. They'll give them more time to become individualized a little bit. So, you know, a little bit of squishing, but now you can see that they are flying together and they're squishing together. And yeah, now they're going to do a better job of at least being a little bit random. So a lot of it goes to what do we want to start doing with that? We can lower the friction all the way down. So they're very free to slide past each other. And soft bodies afford a lot of different options in that we can give them pressure. Let's give it a little bit of pressure. I can never remember what the scale is, so I'll try 11. And yeah, we'll see it inflate a little bit. Let's do 111. That's going to inflate them like, you know, ballooning spheres, which I think could be kind of cute for what we're aiming for here. I'll say this is another iteration. So now I'm going to grab the force and start cranking up the strength. So it's more than double it up to 100. And these will start squishing in even more. Let's double it again. And as we keep on pulling these in, or as I keep on making it stronger, they're going to start squishing into each other more and more and more. I don't actually need to see those center points. So these are soft bodies, and they're all just being attracted to the center point with some randomness. Now, it is every single point is getting this applied. Thus, that pressure that I put in could be fighting against us visually. But as I keep on increasing this power to heavier and heavier amounts, I am worried that for the point it's going to explode, which it will. But I'm going to keep on increasing this. And you can see that they're going to keep on squishing in. And now we're at such a force that we do feel the squishing. Earlier, we didn't really feel the squishing, but now we do. Now we can actually feel like these are getting compressed in. And actually, that's actually getting visually interesting. I like the way that looks. I'm making it a little bit stronger. And now you really do feel them squishing. This isn't about a particular shape. These are just being pushed in spherically speaking. But it's a very robust shape. All of the polygon sizes are very similar. This pressure is probably doing a good job of... Whoopsie. Sorry, I'm trying to stretch my timeline out, which I forgot to do. Yes, this was a YouTube question, Paul. And there was no link. It was just a, how do you get soft bodies to attract to each other? So they squish against each other. So I think that we now have that, where these are all getting attracted to a center point and squishing against each other. Now, if we were to trap this in inside of some sort of shape, I think that would work well. But I wonder if we could. The problem is going to be that we're not going to have. It's going to start running slow because of how many polygons we have. I am going to try lowering our count a lot here, so that I can make more of them. Let's see if that still sort of works. Yeah, that's actually still working quite well. So the next thought is, what if we make these travel along a line or some text using the same technique? Currently, they're all getting attracted to a particular point. Let's even just draw the line. I don't have anything specific in mind. I guess we can trace our ampersand. Let's see how well that works. Text. We got to do the ampersand. Bing. So we've got that. I accidentally made a T, but that is fine. What scale do I want? Let's say about there. So that's just reference for me so that I can use the spline pen tool and draw out a nice, clean, spline-based single line ampersand. Yeah. Did a pretty nice job on all of it except for this one. Whoop. All right, not bad. So that's now a spline. Tell the cloner to clone. Actually, it seems dangerous. I was going to clone along that spline, which honestly might be a little small now I look at it. I was going to clone along the spline, but that's dangerous. In the field force, instead of doing this spherical field, I shall drag in our spline. The spline, and let's look at it. Turn on this. In fact, it would be great to do a cross section. So what do we got? Z is our 0 point, so I'll zero it out on Z. 2000 by 2000. I want to see lots of them. There we go. Look at that. Look at this following the curvature of that line, which actually could be an additional bonus. I'll keep that in there. Drag in a second iteration of the spline. This one set the layer from distance along to a radius, and now there's a radius along that. Increase the radius. Honestly, the radius can go off to infinity for all we care. You can say up to 1,000. That goes, it can go way out. Essentially, there's not a distance far enough away that they wouldn't be getting attracted to these points. It will. Let's change. Don't show the length. So now you can see the directions. So this, no matter where you are, you're getting attracted to the nearest possible version of the spline. So instead of being attracted to a center point, they're each individually attracted to that. Now it might be backwards. I don't know. So I can hit play. Nope, there, it is working. You can see that they're all attracted directly to the line. So the idea now is create enough of these that it can actually fill up the line here. Now I lower the poly count so that hopefully we can make enough of these. Oh, interesting. There seems to be some balance points on some of those. So now I have almost the exact count to get them to make the shape. So right there, that's cool. It made the shape. I like it. But we need more of them so they can squish into each other. So essentially we want to double this. That'll be enough to start pumping into each other. It will start getting slower, but it's running reasonably well. No, now we do have to keep in mind. Well, actually the strength is really strong because we made the overall strength, so they should be squishing into each other. And yeah, they are visually squishing in. But we did lower the poly count, which makes everything feel a little less squishy. So I'm going to double the strength. So yeah, there we go. Now they're gonna yeah, there we go. Now look at them start to squish. And actually, yeah, look like they're squishing. We gotta be careful because now you can see a couple of them seem like they might be intersecting. It's hard to tell. If I double my steps per frame, it will cut our calculation time, or it's going to take twice as long to calculate. But let's see if that sort of works. Let these all fly into their, whatever empty area there is. They should, because there's enough of them and they freely slide past each other, it'll pretty much always fill in the entire shape. So yeah, I don't think I've actually seen I haven't seen a render that looks like it does this, where it is filling up the entire thing with these squishy shapes that are all attempting to get in the same spot. The more of them that we make, we could make more of them, we could make them smaller, we could crank up the field strength to make them all want to be in a particular spot. We could do all of those things and it would work. It just starts becoming a question of speed. Speaking of which, I am we didn't turn the random field back on just to add in some random motion where they might want to be moving around, but we also have this spline that is set to along. And if I set that offset to 100%, let me just show you what that's doing by itself. You can see that this actually wants to travel along the path of this. So these might all want to be moving. And then it might not look great because it's going to want to enter in a particular spot. And that particular spot isn't going to have a flow for them to go in. And it's going to be all getting spewed out of another spot. So it might not look amazing, but I think it should give us some nice looking motion. We're to the point that I don't want to see the lines. I don't want to see any of that. I would like to see more of these smaller. T for scale. I'll make a third row of them in the random I'm sorry, in the cloner, I'm going to add a plane effector. The plane effector will not affect the position. It's going to take on the field color. In the fall off, adding in a random field, we can control the color. Actually, turn on color. There we go. So now they're all colorized. We get some different colors. Hit NA so that we just see them flat. I don't really care about font tags. I'll delete those. Save it. Don't need to see the spline. It's still showing that random field there. Let's see it. Control B. Viewport renderer. Don't save. Output. Square render. Cut it in half so that we have enough RAM. Say all frames. Output. Viewport renderer. Copy effects from viewport. And I'll also load my crisp preset so I just have the no horizon or anything like that. There we go. That should be everything that I want. Let's just frame up on the ampersand. All right. Let's see if that works. It's going to start running slow enough in the viewport. That is why I'm setting up a render, even if it is just a viewport render. Continue without saving. Send it to the viewport. I mean, I don't think it's going to take that long, but it's going to be so slow that we can't. Whoa. Oh, boy. I just realized as we keep on cranking up, actually this is pretty interesting, as we keep on cranking up the overall power of the entire thing, it's making all of these more powerful, which is kind of funny and interesting. I think that's not very reasonable. I'm going to jump this back to 100, which is a very small number, and now on that single spline that is squishing them in really tightly, I'm going to make that stronger. So that can be moved up to 2000. So these other ones are exerting a pretty minor force, all things considered, because we don't want 2000% of randomness. We just want 2000% squish into the center point. So these are doing a fine job of squishing in to their individual locations. Let's see how, if we start seeing too much or the movement, because we do have a big randomness overall pushing everything. And I want to see if they're traveling. And it does seem like they are. These all seem to be traveling up and then around and through. So they're all going to start gathering up here and it's going to empty out this section. But let's just see what that starts looking like. Scrolling. We got more people hanging out all over the place. I appreciate it. Looks like there's lots of birthdays today. Yeah, see, that's looking all right. Let's look at this in real time. Oh, that's really neat. Whee! Actually, what's funny is because we have two splines crossing over each other, it's ending up where we have a circle, and they're just kind of bouncing past each other because you get that crossover point. All right, so that's not bad. We need to do a couple of things. I'm going to cut our power in half again. It's really strong. In fact, I'll go to 40, so it's like, oh, we have gravity. Then I want the squishiness. We cut it in less than half, so about 5,000 will be about the same as what we had. Everything else should be significantly smaller, less so. Now, I actually want them to squish even more than they are. Also, how much are they squishing? Picture viewer. Yeah, I mean, it's calculating quick enough. It's not the quickest thing, but I'll add an extra row. That should fill them out a little bit more, even more. And they are free to slide past each other very easily. So hopefully everything is slowed down to, I guess, at least half. It does look like a couple of them are crashing into and through each other, which isn't great. But let's just see if they work themselves out. They didn't explode. See you, Trey. Hello, everybody who's come to hang out. So let's see how well that's working. I mean, they're all squishing in. It might be a good idea to put a subdivision surface on the entire thing, so they'd be getting subdivide after effect. But we're definitely getting, these feel squishy now. They're squishing in. We didn't change any of our soft body settings, but as soon as it's running at speed, you can definitely feel like this wobbling squishiness. Bling, bling. Now, I mean, our steps per frame, we could crank it up more. But yeah, even now, I mean, it's not like it's slow, but this isn't quick. It's taking a full couple of seconds to process each frame because we're throwing a lot of individual soft bodies and they're all colliding with each other. And the forces are incredibly strong. They're really trying to squish into each other. But man, Fields has really, like, how would you have done, look at this crazy shape. How would you have done this pre-Fields? It would have been incredibly difficult. I probably would have had to have cloned a whole bunch of attractors along a spline and make a bunch of wind cloned along a spline, make those editable, make complex rigs in order to control each of them individually. The zero friction is really cool where these can slide past each other so easily. That's a nice detail. Now, let's see, what would I possibly change here? Well, let's make a couple of changes. I'll let that keep processing while we're doing it. Make the cubes a little bigger, just to, like, volume is a lot. If I increase these a little bit, we've actually really eaten up more of the space. A couple of extra steps per frame would stop some of those intersections. They're very free to slide past each other. I don't know if this would help, but if we make our ampersand visible in 3D space, I could scoot out this middle point here so they can curve out forward a little bit. And if I were to grab this point equivalent one and move it backward, grow it, move it backward, then these should have a little bit of space between them, so they should be free to slide past. In fact, I think I went too far on that. And I'll redo, select all T for scale, scale them back, just enough so that they want to slide past each other a little bit. And honestly, the same sort of applies here. So this could also be back in space a little bit, and this one can be forward in space a little bit, just so that they're not completely running into each other. So in general, they want to flow forward and backward. So that could be a nice little addition. Now, and I also mentioned, trying to undo my view. There we go. As I mentioned, they are trying to travel around it. So eventually they'll all find the closest line and it'll travel around and they'll keep on getting spit out into essentially a graveyard right here. And there's nothing to spit them back into the original shape. There's things potentially that we could do to make those work, but yeah, I'm not sure. Now they're super inflating, which is another, we put a lot of pressure in here to keep them inflated. That is going to help maintain their shape. I could, well, we were just at 111, I think. We could go, drop it in half. Also, the structure is probably a good idea, but we could give it more flexion and shear, or less flexion and shear to make them squishier. But at a certain point, they might start exploding. I'll try making them squishier. They might wiggle around a little bit more. Also, there's this damping, which is draining the energy out from the different systems. I'm going to get rid of all the damping. So it's going to be very wiggly is the idea. I'll even get rid of the structural damping. So there should be a lot of energy in the scene overall. It's possible that they're more likely to explode. Let's see what we end up with for this one rendering. I mean, it's going to take even longer for this new one, but it's doing its thing. They are kind of getting roadblocked a little bit. So I'll speed up. We can make some of these individual ones stronger. So this random field, it's already at 200. I'll do 300, a little more randomness there. And this one that travels along, I'll double that so it wants to travel along twice as much as it currently is. Turn on the cloner, save it as another version. You never know which one you're going to strike gold. E, don't show spline. And let's let that run for a little bit. But we might start the next question. Vitas, or not, apologies for not knowing the pronunciation. That's old school. And those definitely weren't squishy. Whoa, super squishy. And hopefully the extra steps per frame are stopping them from exploding into each other, but they definitely can compress in and squish. Oh, I'd also said we could try and put a subdivision surface on them. Don't know how well that's going to work. I wonder if we put the entire, it breaks the, coloring of it, but I wonder if we could do that. And honestly, just one subdivision could go a long way. I don't know if that'll work, but we'll see very quickly. Sometimes soft bodies can get confused, or subdivision surfaces can break things. It's hard to tell. No, it's seemingly working. I know I got rid of the font tag, but it's stylizing it a little bit, I suppose. wonder how much that's changing things. Blurp. No, that's interesting. Blurp. I mean, this will look a lot better if we can get the subdivision working. But yeah, I like that. Blurp. And these traveling past each other is nice. They should still be colliding a little bit. We could ramp into the attraction to the line as well, so it doesn't have to like snap in quite so hard. This might be a wise idea. They're whipping into each other so much, you get this really harsh collision as they all whip into this final spot. A little bit of a transition there could be a good idea. I think the subdivision surface of really, I don't know why, but it's really slowing it down. I don't like what I'm seeing there. So just for our testing purposes, we'll leave it unsubdivided. I know there's other things we can do to do it, but I'll leave it there. We'll just see what that looks like, and I'll try and see if there's any other questions here. Just a moment. Now, what do we get? We definitely have time for another question. I wish there was pizza. Actually, pizza on Friday. We're getting some pizza delivered. My favorite pizza in the Chicago area is from Aurelio's, which actually is it's a small chain, like a family chain, but it started down in the suburbs where I used to live. Anybody have any other questions while this one's still processing? We'll keep an eye on this one, but I can also scroll back up and see if I can find extra questions. Lots of conversation happening in Twitch, so it's hard to find the specifics. Range Attacker, nice name, has a link to YouTube at 2619. Let's see what we have here. Oh, you linked to the proper time. Man versus machine. That's always super dangerous. Man versus machine. For Houdini. Houdini Hive worldwide. Oh, goodness. And what you're saying at 19? So you're talking about this one? Oh, probably that one. Blurb. Oh, man. I'm going to just go and say we really can't. Like it's for the most part, conceptually, it's just straight up soft bodies. You put a question in the hair card sim. I don't know what hair card sim means. But you can just post the question again. Like, you're free to post the question a second time. Just don't spam it to Ibrahim. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing. I can't even say. I can't pronounce correctly. Oh, I see your question up higher. Would it be possible in cinema to simulate a low poly hairs as if they are real hairs? Low poly hairs. Would it be possible to simulate low poly hair cards as if they are real hair? Well, when I guess I'm not entirely clear on what you mean by low poly hair cards. My immediate thought would be that you're talking about. Let's see. What can we? I think we can open up the other file. Yeah, we can go back here, and I'm going to lower the count way down. I'm not sure what you mean by. I'm not entirely sure what you mean by that wording, but if I'm following, you can, in the hair, which is already set up from the previous one, I can say, go and generate something. In this case, I'm going to say, let's generate triangles. So we're generating these little triangles along the individual lines. And if we were to change the count of the segments, thus say lower this down to 6, so it starts becoming very low poly. Actually, that's a thought. Can we see the scale if I say length? There's the scale and has every segment. If I turn that off and go to length and do a lot of randomness, does it cut off? Dang you, randomness. See, this is what I'm talking about. Everybody, people are like, oh, length. Don't use length. Use scale. I don't see a difference. I just said to use length, and it still has all 6 subdivisions. So if it's cutting off at the length, then why does it still have 6? Why doesn't it have less polygons? So there's no difference. No difference between scale and length. I'm sticking to it. So going to thickness, we can lower the thickness down on the tip. And if you're going, stylizing things like old school, like anime game type hair, we can set the length of the root and the tip the same thing, and we can start getting these like that. And it does have a Phong tag, so if I delete the Phong tag, these become really fat hairs that are low poly, and you can tell the hairs exactly how to generate them. So currently it's triangles. You can set the squares, so they're individually square. And if you were inclined, you can also say flat. So these are now flat. And if they're flat, you could be applying any texture or material, layering that up however you want it to. There's very few of these, so I'll tell it to stay off the surface. And now you can see they layer up quite nicely. And they're not quite touching the surface, and they're super low poly, and they could be as low poly as we want them to be. All directly controlled in the hair guides. So it's 6, but we can drop this down to 4. Now it's at 3, so then you see it's incredibly low poly. We'll increase the length a little bit. And, those are, is that what you mean by a card? I'm not sure. Shane, you think that the hair length and scale only differ in how they combine with other things like curl and bend. Well, that's interesting if it's true. I never use curl and bend because it's not very directly controllable. If the model was animated, it would work the same still. Yeah, this is, they're not colliding with each other. There is a setting to turn that on, but that can get a little bit slow. But let's try turning on because we have very few. So under dynamics, surface to hair. Oh, we can do a hair to hair forces. I forget which one it is, but yeah, this might start making it so they don't want to collide. Also, we get rid of all of our rest hold, so it seems like that'd be a good idea to give some there. Keep that a little bit straighter. There we go. But this is fully live and dynamic. So if that was our low poly hair and cards, I can just grab the original object and move it around. You see that they're all connected. So that could be a character. This could be a deforming mesh. It should all just be stuck to the surface. So yeah, it works pretty much that straightforwardly. It's really cool that you can generate geometry from hair. It's a very, very robust system. I'll save that as a number 4. Low poly hair. Mohammed is asking about motors and dynamic splines. How would you combine a motor with a dynamic spline? That is an interesting question. I don't know if we've ever answered a question using motors inside of one of the live streams like this. But how would you, hair, spline, we have spline dynamics. Yes, we have that. I don't know if spline dynamics, I'm sorry, let me clarify. We have soft body dynamics. Can motors be applied to a soft body dynamic object? We could potentially connect it to something that has a motor applied to it. But at that point, you could make a hair object run and then just apply hair on top of it. And let's see, we'll probably stop this soon. I think I'm going to run out of frames quickly. Let's see how this ended up. Blurp. Yep, it's doing exactly what I said. It's working. It's actually traveling too quickly now. Go figure. Maybe because it's not getting clustered up there. Maybe it accelerates in as well. But you can see how they're starting to bunch up down here and they don't have anywhere to go. And the rest of the line is getting emptied out. Blurp, 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 blurp. But yeah, I like this. This is cool. I haven't specifically seen this as an effect. So really crank up our steps per frame, letting them squish in. We got to figure out that subdivision so we can make it a little bit smoother, because obviously these are really chunky right now. If they looked like little pieces of chewing gum or something, I think that'd be pretty neat. But we sit backwards. There we go. Now it recovers. Looks like a little snake twirling its tail. Yeah, that's cool. I like. We can save that as a little animation. Save as a animation MP4. Yes, with those settings. Okay. Please save into episode 25 renders. Blink. Processed and done. I didn't get any clarification about the motor with hair. Motors are actually incredibly simple to use, all things considered. I guess dialing them in perfectly can be challenging, but if let's make this cue and make it dynamic. Motor and dynamic splines. Can we wrap a chain around a spline and pull the spline from the side using a motor? I mean, aren't all the motors? Well, let's just do a test. I'm going to say I want a rigid body, and there's only one type of motor, right? Yeah, there's one type of motor, and well, I guess there's angular and linear. I don't think I've ever used a linear one. I don't know why would you use a motor? I don't know. Well, first of all, let's just talk about some super basics. Here's a rigid body, and it's free to fall with gravity. I'm going to feed it a connector, feed it into the connector, and now it can't fall. It can only spin. So it's kind of stuck there. And we could see it spin if I were to make another cube. I think it's going to spin on this axis, so that should fall and hit it. Bunk, and then you can see it's twirling on that axis. So, and this is the actual one being driven. So, applying a motor the same way, I can take the motor and feed this in. So I want a motor apply. Now you can see immediately it's like, we're applying force to it and wants to do something. And that kind of stuff can be pretty fun. So now it is doing work. Energy is being added constantly to the scene, and you can change the speed and the torque, the angle. Now I've never tried it, like I said, with an angular. Yeah, I don't even know how this would work. Let's change the connector type to a planar connector. And I can see it's free to slide around on a two-dimensional plane. So now it's got this linear, but see, it's not doing anything. It might need two objects to do it. Boing. So I'll make a second object. If I tell the motor to go from one to the other, and this one's not connected to it needs its own connector. That one. Yeah. Like that. Yeah, see, it's not doing anything. Yeah, I don't know what a linear motor does. I've never tinkered with it. Having said all that, that's not helpful to us. But I think you could totally do things with a motor, with chains and a motor if you want to kind of drive it realistically. Although at a certain point, if things are just dynamically linked, then you don't need to worry about it. I'm going to skip a lot of steps here by grabbing the dynamic chain from the dynamic chain tutorial. Bing. Oh. That is, actually it might be, no, it's not the one we want. Stress test, break chain. That doesn't seem right. I have a lot of files. What are we even? Oh my goodness, that was a completely unrelated thing. Trying to figure out buoyancy. This is episode 6. Okay, I might be able to steal the chain links from here. What's the simplest one? I really just want the static, and there's a snapping one. I don't want the snapping one. I just want a link, which is this, and a static link. Yeah, there we go. That's the ticket. What's our dynamic settings? No collision margin. Lots of steps per frame. We don't need that many. New file, paste. Cloner, reset PSR. I guess it's cloning into an object. Make it linear. There, now I can have a dynamic chain. These are pure dynamic chain. I have an entire tutorial on dynamic chains. It should be on the same channel on YouTube. You should be able to find that easily. So I should be able to make as many links on this chain as I want, and they are all instantly dynamic. Thus, if I were to make a dynamic floor and hit play, that should just run, and you see we've got a lovely dynamic chain ready to just hit the floor and do its thing. So if I wanted to, let's just say we want to wind this up on some sort of wheel. I'm going to create a cylinder, scoot it up. I'm going to start by making this a collider version. So I'm going to make a collider body, and that collider body, we've got this static link. And the static link is also from the tutorial, so you can make a static link that doesn't want to go anywhere. This one, I'll rotate 90 degrees. The cloner, yeah, I'll rotate that 90 degrees. Hey, I guessed correctly. And let's see, how do I want to combine those two? I think I actually ran into some limitations before, but I might be able to, no, yep, nope, maybe, I don't know. I might be able to drop this static link on that shape and make this all one giant dynamic object. I'm not sure. So let's see if that, oh, those sort of seem to work. I don't know if I fully trust it, but let's just see. Now, we've got this big wheel. I am simply going to keyframe it, 999. So I don't know what axis we want to rotate on. B. So record B. Fast forward to, I don't even know what time. Let's just go all the way to the end, and I'll spin it 720 times 2. Also the same as 360 times 4. Why is it hopping? Do you see it's refreshing on me? Don't refresh. 360 times 4. Click, and it refreshes. Why are you doing that? Something to do with the dynamics. I don't know. How do I stop that from doing that? I'm going to force Cinema to behave by copying that first keyframe at the time of 0. And with it selected, I can just type in whatever I want. 360 times 4. Take that, Cinema. You can't stop me. I'll make it linear by selecting all and setting it to linear. Now, I don't know what speed that's going to be. It might be way too fast. So let's hit play and see what we end up with. Yeah, okay. Actually, that's a really, really good speed. So there we go. All I've done was add 2 keyframes in onto the same dynamic chain that we made in the tutorial. Now, here's what's really cool is if you're working with a simple chain like what I made here, it can still be live in the cloner. Okay, so a couple of problems. You see it's slid off of a couple things. We should probably add a decent amount of friction. So there's our link. And currently it's friction 0. So let's give it some friction so it wants to stop. And because there was no friction, it slid right off the cylinder. So we lost 1. And as this rotates, it's also a little close to the floor. I can move the floor down. I guess I can make it spin twice as fast. It's not going too crazy. So we'll do that. And it's running quite, well, actually it's already 200 links. So that's actually a lot of links. This is running incredibly well. So cylinder, select that last keyframe, double the speed, and let's let that go. And now with that friction on there, I think it broke. Okay, that's not surprising. Let's make a B there. There's a lot of additive friction on that floor. So let's make it not bouncy and have very low friction. So it should be a little easier to slide along. It still might break. So we might need to crank up steps per frame because right now we're in a scene file that the steps per frame are only, it's only set to 5, which is very little. But you can see this actually just instantly working. The basics of once you have a chain working, all the stuff, you kind of get it for free. And it should be robust. And I'm kind of amazed that this is working this fast and this well. Oh, that's interesting. How did that tilt? I didn't see that tilt earlier. Why did that tilt? Is this a compound collision shape ellipsoid? Oh, dynamic on. Why is that working at all? If it's dynamic off. Super weird. Well, all right. I'm confused. Was there some sort of... Oh, and that broke right away. Now I'm getting extra confused. Why did that work? Well, okay. Anyway, you saw that working. We could crank up the steps per frame to 15, and I think that this will just now work. Running a little bit slower, but I think it should hopefully be enough steps per frame to keep that locked, and I'm not sure how that was running properly, semi-properly, with it being dynamic. That's really weird. Anyway, you can see that working. It's all sliding up. It's working just fine. Now, can we make it motor driven? And depending on what your goal is, like it depends on how important that the motor idea here would be. I'm curious where it's useful to actually make it fully dynamic like that instead of this kind of half dynamic. Well, let's go ahead and make it dynamic again. So this should be a dynamic object that's free to move around. Maybe it's just rolling on the ground and it has a really strong follow position. Oh, it does have that's why it worked. It has a really strong follow position. Okay, well, at least that mystery solved. Turn those off. All right, now with that mystery solved, I'll add a connector as a child, hit reset PSR, so it's right there in the center. Link to that, and now I think, if I did that correctly, yeah, this is pivoting from the correct orientation. So this is now locked in place, but it's fully dynamic and should be able to spin. Now there is no longer a follow position on it, so it's just free to do whatever it wants. It's just hanging out. So I think we'll need some friction on that floor again. I thought I had, yeah, a little higher. There, now it's not going super nuts and overshooting. So now we apply the motor. So cylinder, you look like you're in the need of the motor object. Once again, reset PSR, it's already in the correct spot. Make that drive this object. That motor should now be applying force. It might be too much, it might be too fast. It's actually quite strong right now. Let's see where it breaks. It's still continuing to work. And it's just the motor doing its thing. It's really speeding up, so the chain's overshooting. This might break at any point. Whip! Oh, shockingly, it did hold on. It does seem like some of them might be passing through. That could be the steps per frame again. Also, this motor is running way quicker than I was fully expecting it to. But that worked surprisingly well, all things considered. Chill the motor out. Essentially, the target speed is the important one. What you want is the target speed that is not faster than what you want, and a really strong torque. The strong torque is what's saying, like, apply this amount of power no matter what. It's really strong power. So now you see this is a more constant speed, and it's got so much torque that it's going to be inclined to just like power on through the entire time. But pretty cool. And yeah, this is now a motor applying the force, able to pull it. And yeah, as you can, I mean, it gets more interesting when we start applying additional things, and you can actually have various things fight each other. And I don't, not literally, but if this was connected to some other additional structure, so that it could be getting pulled back in space, or let's say there was a dynamic car attached to the end of this chain and that was pulling against it, then it's like, okay, now the dynamics are potentially relevant. There's even the level where if this chain was heavy enough, I feel like that motor could probably get forced to rotate backward because there just would be too much weight on it. Now, technically, there's actually getting to be less and less weight pulling against it as we let this spin. But I think that's probably true. I wonder if we could actually, I'm curious because it's wrapping around it very nicely, and it did slide off. We could, it is pulling through. Yeah, that's slightly unfortunate. You just see everything that's happening is pulling the chain through the object. Now we are doing that compound collision shape to stop that from piercing it. We can make what would probably be smart would be to do a slightly more complex version of that, which would be, we can separate the static link from it. And that static link, they're both dynamic now, but this cylinder we can tell to be calculated as a cylindrical object. So I can say cylinder on Z axis. So hopefully that's now a very nice clean cylinder. We have these two different objects, and thus I could create a connector, a fixed connector, and say I want to connect the cylinder to the static link, but that might explode. I don't know. No, it's still on there, so that might automatically work better. Who knows? It could work worse. Now, just as a, I'm gonna make it a little bigger. As a experiment, what I would like to do is make some wind. This is now a motor, and it's pulling on that. Actually, I'm gonna lower the torque. How low can we make the torque and have it still rotate? So now it's down at 10. I'm gonna drop it to 1. Okay, it's apparently not needing that much torque. This has a lot more weight overall, so that might actually be contributing. I'm going to keep on lowering the torque until I see a visual difference. Yeah, okay, now finally looks a little bit like it's struggling. 0.01. Yeah, okay, it's finally like struggling a little bit. And there's very, very little torque, which is actually pretty interesting. And at a certain point, this might not be able to, yeah, now it's struggling. And I guess you do get that for free. There's a lot of work to get to this point, but now it doesn't have enough power to pull that all the way. I'll make it 5 times as strong. Still not strong enough. Maybe everything fell asleep. Double that strength again. 10 times that. I think, nope, that was finally enough to break it or to pull it out from there. But you can see that if you do the proper amount of torque, that will actually start stopping it. Now, just as a fun little experiment, I will create the simulation forces wind. And this wind is probably applying everything immediately. Let's blow it in the correct direction, which will be negative 90. Come on. Negative. Oh, the cinema's doing the thing where it doesn't want to type if it's playing. So if this wind is now blowing on everything in the scene, if we keep on cranking this wind strength up higher and higher, I bet you that we can get to the point where, yeah, this wind is blowing really strongly in all these objects. It's still, I mean, we did put a lot of torque on that now. And I have a feeling that, well, if we push the wind too far, it's going to break. Yeah, it's going to break the simulation. So we need to find that happy balance between enough power in the simulation. Let's turn the wind off. And I want very little torque. 0.01 was not quite enough, so we'll do 0.05. That should give it a start. And I just want to see if we give it enough wind. It's still running well, so I'll give it a couple. We'll calculate 25. It's going to go slower, but it'll be more accurate. So this is enough for it to start pulling. But now if we turn the wind on at this power, is it enough to grab this chain? And can this actually be pulled backwards? Yes, look, it works. So the wind is blowing on the chain, and that's pulling enough for that to start spinning the opposite direction. If we turn it off, then the chain should hopefully, it's got a little bit of momentum going. And the weight of this shape probably has a lot to do with it. So it's slowly applying the torque the proper direction, but it has to work its way through that initial bit of mass, which is actually shockingly got a lot of follow through. So I think there's a little bit of a conflict between the power of this motor and the amount of torque that we're applying. So where I kept on cranking up the power of the motor, what we really might want to do is lower the power of this log. So this is going to decelerate and eventually re-accelerate back in the other direction. I can also turn the wind on and it's going to yank it again. And that should automatically kickstart the direction the other way. But, you know, you can immediately put this type of stuff in the world of this motor and start working in the idea of torque. So this is neat. I like it. Pause this, save it. And I guess in the show notes, I'll make sure to put a link to that tutorial because it shows you exactly how to make that joint chain. And it's a 2-part tutorial, and the second one is breaking chains. But the first part is really important because you can make these very fast but accurate calculating dynamic chains. Let's see. Lots of conversation going. Connector, simpler, springs, connector. Yeah, Dean mentioning the cylinder shape would be good there. Once it started intersecting, I went and did change it over to that. Let's see. We're pretty much here at the end. I don't have too much time there's a lot I have to do, but we got a couple of questions pop in. I'll see if they seem quick. Yeah, well, people seem to like the motor thing. We should tinker with that more if people are into it, because motors are great. I'd done a bunch with it back in the day. I was making fully dynamic cars driven by motors, and they would battle each other and pieces would fall off the car. It was really cool. I'll see what Java's got here, but we might need to save it for next week. Is there audio? Can't tell if there's audio. This was posted from the Houdini one, but it's a repost from Diffuse FX. Now it looks like, yeah, okay, it's kind of a, oh, it's like lava. That's interesting. Well, essentially it's a snowball concept, except it's rolling on the ground and pulling up like molten rock. Interesting. I like this idea. It's a big question. We might be able to do things with it. I'm not sure. So hit me up next week on that one. I'll keep an eye out for it, Java, and we'll definitely tackle it next week if you hit me up with a question again. But yeah, there we go. That's a tease. It's a tease for next week. So we got to tackle a couple of fun ones today. I'm trying to think. Yeah, well, now my brain's trying to solve that one, but I'm not going to think about it until we do it because I like trying to figure these out live with everyone here. Hopefully, we tackled some questions that were interesting. Is there anything else to cover? Nope. Make sure you check out the new tutorial on the YouTube channel. I think it's a pretty good one. It's got good information about just Voronoi fracture and breaking things and doing time remapping, like matrix type time remapping. So that's pretty fun. Thank you so much for all the questions. It was really cool, as always. Hopefully I can get that Lego face rigging tutorial recorded, but like I said, maybe that one won't work out. Yeah, thank you so much, everybody, and I'll see you next week. So, adios.